This is Michael Popok, Legal AF. Remember the name Jeff McConney. Jeff McConney had been the controller for Donald Trump since 1987, working under Alan Weisselberg, the chief financial officer. Both of those gentlemen testified against Donald Trump ultimately at the tax fraud conviction case just last year, in which Donald Trump's organizations were convicted of 17 counts of tax fraud. And so was Alan Weisselberg. Now Jeff McConney, one of the lead money men for Donald Trump, is testifying in the second week of the civil fraud case against Donald Trump in New York. Let me unpack Jeff McConney, because he is supremely interesting and is a secret weapon for Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, in her case and her presentation of the case for the 6 counts of fraud and conspiracy that are left before Judge Engoron on the bench trial. Talked a lot about last week in the trial because Donald Trump showed up for 2.5 days and it became the Donald Trump show, which the New York Attorney General said has now left town like a circus. And let's get back to the methodical and orderly presentation of evidence, like a cobra squeezing her prey lifeless. And that's what's happening in the courtroom. Let's talk about the witnesses, and now Jeff McConney up to bat. The first two witnesses that Letitia James's office called. Now, she's not trying the case. Other lawyers in her office are trying the case. But the first two were Don Bender, a 15-year outside accountant for an accounting firm called Mazars, who testified about all the work he did for 12 years for his biggest client, Donald Trump, all the Trump kids and the Trump organization and their entities as their tax accountant, filing their tax documents. And he admitted under oath that much of what he was given by the Trump organization and Donald Trump himself was not complete or was invalid. That was the start of it. Remember that Mazars had already withdrawn from the representation and fired their client, Donald Trump, his family, and these organizations noisily, declaring after they knew they were in the crosshairs of the Attorney General that nothing that they said in auditing and certifying financials for the last 12 years was true. That Mazars, that's witness number one. Then another witness who was an outside auditor or accountant for Donald Trump also testified. Now, in the second week, we've got the first insider for Donald Trump's organization, right? Knows where all the bodies are buried since 1987, Jeff McConney, senior vice president and controller of the company. The controller sits usually under a chief financial officer, reports to that person, and is responsible for the books and records and controls of the company and the movement of money within a company, a valuable witness. Now, Jeff McConney already testified, so we got a preview of what his testimony would be in the case last year, presided over by Judge Merchan in the Manhattan District Attorney's criminal case for tax fraud against Trump's organization and all of the little companies under him, and Alan Weisselberg. He testified there with immunity as a witness for the prosecution with full immunity, and that led, along with Alan Weisselberg's testimony, to the conviction on 17 counts. So we know what Jeff McConney was going to say before he even took the stand. Jeff McConney already testified that he participated in tax fraud at Alan Weisselberg's request to cover the tracks for tax evasion by Weisselberg, his wife, and 2 other senior executives that worked for the Trump organization, Matt Calamari and Matt Calamari Jr. I'm not making these names up. Sounds like an Elroy Leonard novel, but I'm not making it up. They are the head of security and other things related to security for the Trump organization. And he said, I participated in tax fraud. And so we already knew that this was going to be a bumpy ride, strap-in, white-knuckle moment for the Trump defense team as they faced in witness number 3 for the New York Attorney General, Jeff McConney. Now, let me explain how you pull what's called a hostile witness into your case in chief. The New York Attorney General is on her case in chief, meaning it's her case right now with her witnesses in her order. She controls, along with the judge, the presentation of evidence. Generally, you call friendly witnesses that you have control over in some way, that you've practiced and rehearsed with, so you know what their testimony is going to be, so to make your case. Occasionally, You grab a hostile witness or somebody that you're not sure about. In this case, Jeff McConney, who is a defendant in the New York Attorney General case. He's also sued. Sometimes people forget it's not just Donald Trump and Eric and Don Jr. But it's also Alan Weisselberg, Jeff McConney, and all of the major Trump entities, including his trust, that are the defendants in the civil fraud case. You don't normally call the defendant in your case in chief. You wait till he's called in the defense case when it finally gets there in, 50 or 60 trial days from now, because it's going to take that long for Letitia James's people to put on their case. And you wait there and then you cross-examine, unless you feel you need testimony from the adverse side to make your case, because you have the burden in your case in chief in order to avoid dismissal at the close of your evidence, to put on all the elements with all the supporting facts. Sometimes the supporting facts, knowledge, information, document is sitting with some people that are not your friends, that are not friendly witnesses, and that's called calling an adverse witness. Sometimes that person can be a defendant in the case or just a witness that's hostile. When that happens, you are given the benefit of treating that person like you are cross-examining them in the cross-examination phase of the case, meaning you can ask leading questions. You can say, isn't it true? Didn't you? Wasn't it? And just get yes or no answers. If you're not allowed to lead, which is your own witnesses generally, you have to ask them open-ended questions and let them testify. You can't suggest the answer of yes or no in the premise of your question. That's the difference between leading and cross-examination and asking open-ended questions in direct. Why am I telling this story in breakout session of Legal AF Law School? Because witness number 3 was a hostile witness pulled across from the defense side into the case in chief by the prosecutors in Jeff McConney. Now, it wasn't as much of a high wire act as that would appear, because that's a very ballsy move, which I like. I like those. I've done it in my own trials. But they already had the benefit of McConney's testimony with immunity in the criminal case. So they knew he wasn't going to take the Fifth Amendment. You can't take the Fifth Amendment if you're not really subject to a criminal prosecution, and he isn't, because he's got full immunity from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, and the statute of limitations is run on other things. So he wasn't going to take the Fifth, but he could deviate from his testimony, and he's in the hands of the defense. When running a business, your employees can create all kinds of interesting situations, like somebody isn't showing up when they're supposed to. Talk to Bambi. An employee reports a serious issue like sexual harassment, and you're not sure if you have a documented policy. Talk to Bambi. With Bambi, get access to your own dedicated HR manager, starting at just $99 per month. They're available by phone, email, and real-time chat. So onboarding and terminations, they run smoothly. Team members reach peak performance, and your business stays compliant with changing HR regulations. And with Bambi's HR Autopilot, you'll automate important HR practices like setting policies, training, and feedback. Bambi's dedicated HR managers are US-based people dedicated to your business, giving you access to the HR expertise and personal touch you need. HR managers can easily cost $80,000 a year, but Bambi starts at $99 per month. Schedule your free conversation today to see how much Bambi can take off your plate. Go to Bambi.com right now and type in Legal AF under podcast when you sign up. It'll really help the show. Spelled BAMBEE.com, Bambi.com, and type in Legal AF. But they knew if he deviated from his testimony at the trial of the criminal trial, they would impeach him, meaning they'd had sworn testimony of him under oath saying one thing, and if he tried to say something else now in front of Judge Engoron in the civil case, they could impeach him, demonstrate to the court that he is lying and he is changing his testimony from something under oath, which is called perjury, right? As among many things. And so that's how you impeach a witness. So today they had him up on the stand. Again, the white knuckle moment. And I guess they gave this witness, who's probably so far, besides Don Bender, the number one witness, I think, in the first insider, the money man, one of them two bag men for Donald Trump, one being Alan Weisselberg, convicted felon, and the other being this guy. They turned that over apparently to Alina Habba to defend. And she showed that she's not ready for prime time and she doesn't have the chops to be a trial lawyer, because in the middle of the cross-examination, she jumped up, according to reporting from inside the room, and said, "Objection!" leading that the lawyer that's representing the Office of the Attorney General was leading and asking yes or no questions. And the judge had to remind, and that's Andrew Amer, A-M-E-R. If you're collecting all of the superhero dolls for the New York Attorney General, look for Andrew Amer at a store near you, because he's handling this particular witness for the OAG. And she said, Habba said, "Objection, leading." And the judge says he's a defendant in the case, meaning he's obviously hostile. And if he's a hostile witness, you can cross-examine. Sometimes when it's a little unclear if the witness is hostile or not, and you start getting they're not playing properly in the sandbox when you're examining them in a courtroom, and I've been known to do this too, you turn to the judge and you ask for permission to treat the witness as hostile. Permission to treat the witness as hostile, Your Honor. Granted, Mr. Popok, you may continue. And then you get to cross-examine with yes or no questions. Alina Habba either doesn't know that, or the things are going so poorly for her, she wanted to try to break the momentum of Mr. Amer for the Attorney General and stop the train wreck that was happening in front of her. I almost said the clown show that was happening in front of her, but that would be her side. So that's what happened. And what was the testimony today? Testimony today is he's admitted to committing tax fraud and helping Alan Weisselberg, the CFO for 50 plus years of the Trump Organization, commit tax fraud. That's a problem. He also admitted, which is an element of the case, because Donald Trump's been arguing lack of intent. That is an element that Letitia James has the burden of proving at the civil trial on a preponderance of evidence standard that Donald Trump intended to defraud. That's the remaining fraud claims. So in order to show intent, his argument, his defense has been, through his lawyers and on television, has been no reliance, that the banks didn't rely on his fraudulent personal financial statements and statements of financial condition, because there's a worthless clause which says whatever I sign is worthless, whatever that means. And they don't rely on my financial statements. But McConney has already testified today that he sent, at Donald Trump's direction in 2015 and 2016, his personal financial statements, Donald Trump's, to a bank as a condition of getting a loan. That means the bank relied on this submission, that it's not worthless, and it was done with the intent to defraud. This is the reason that Letitia James called McConney as a little bit of a high wire act in her case in chief as a hostile witness. Slightly less hostile because they had a transcript they could wave around and discipline the witness from his trial transcript of his testimony before the Manhattan DA, where he continues to have an obligation to tell the truth. Listen, I've had witnesses where just sort of to discipline them or scare the crap out of them, I just pick up the document. They know it's the transcript, right? Maybe I even, as I'm talking, I hold it this way so they can see that I'm holding the transcript from his testimony. And then that I will assure you that that's not trial theatrics. That works. And then you just and you threaten them with it by just kind of holding it in your hand and maybe looking through it on occasion, pulling your glasses down and let me see. Even if you don't use it, it scares the crap out of them. I've done that. I've had a witness on the stand who wrote something that was published, and he didn't know I was going to use it because it was in rebuttal. I'm able to not tell them in advance. And I just had the article sort of with me on my clipboard for a while, and just strategically showed it to him. This is what happens in trial. This is why I think people come to Legal AF, to hear this kind of stuff. So what do we have for Jeff McConney today? One of the two major bagmen, first insider to testify, a hostile witness being cross-examined. He admits already that he committed tax fraud with Alan Weisselberg on behalf of Donald Trump. Ultimately, we already know he testified in the tax fraud case that he was told by Don Bender, the outside accountant, that they were improperly and fraudulently using a bonus system to pay executives bonuses at Donald Trump's behest, where portions of it was not taxed. because they submitted it as some sort of independent contractor for no reason, a portion of the bonus, and part of it they used as an employee under a W-2 withholding scenario. That's complicated. All that means is they're committing tax fraud related to their bonuses, and their outside auditor told them so before Donald Trump ran for office. This is great. We're going to follow the continued testimony of Jeff McConney, because Amer, the lawyer for the new Office of Attorney General, knows he's got McConney on the ropes, and he's going for the jugular, question by question, and disciplining him by holding up his testimony where he got immunity in the tax evasion case in case he deviates from things that they need in the civil fraud case. And that just shows what good lawyering looks like. We're seeing it with the New York Attorney General using other sworn statements and deposition testimony, trial testimony in other cases against Donald Trump. We're seeing it by federal prosecutors using that same thing against him and his own statements against him in their actions. It's just called good lawyering. And if you want to see the difference, look over at the table representing Donald Trump, because that's the opposite of that. We'll continue to follow the testimony of Jeff McConney and bring it to you in hot takes like this one throughout the day and throughout the week on the MeidasTouch Network, the only place you can get facts and analysis, legal analysis at the intersection of law, politics, and justice. One place. We don't blow smoke or sunshine here on the MeidasTouch Network. That's where you can find me, Michael Popok, and all of my hot takes. And on Legal AF on Wednesdays and Saturdays, the leading podcast at the intersection of law, politics, and justice, with my co-anchors, Ben Meiselas and Karen Friedman-Agnifilo. Give me a thumbs up on this to keep my content coming to you. It helps with the ratings. Until my next hot take, until my next episode of Legal AF, this is Michael Popok reporting.
Hey, Meidas Mighty, love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram at MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.